Where does religion come from? Like, what's the source? And where does the state come from? Would it shock you to learn that it's from the same place? Let's talk about the scapegoat. Our world is lost in unnecessary fear and hurt. Our systems seem scientifically engineered to make you small, powerless, and always waiting for the next great leader who will fix the problems around us. Worse, we're witnessing neighbor versus neighbor while warfare breaks out around our family tables. But you have access to a spirit, a strength that enlarges and empowers you. Even better, you don't need to wait for the next big movement. You can heal the world. It's time for governance by grace. Welcome to Gracearchy with Jim Babka. Hey everybody, I know you've been waiting for this for a long time, and we're going to get into it. I'm Bill Protzman, your moderator. This episode of Gracearchy with Jim Babka is sponsored by the Zero Aggression Project. Please check out www.zeroaggressionproject.org and subscribe there. And believe me, you're going to want to do this. And why? Well, does our world need more zero aggression right now? Zero Aggression Project is a promoter of the zero aggression principle. And that, for simple, very basic reasons, is we refuse to use or endorse coercion, aggression, or excessive force to achieve our personal, social, and political goals. And in the context of what's happening in our world right now, that seems really good and obvious, yet people violate that principle all the time when there's a social problem. And instead of trying to do the zero aggression principle, they turn to two institutions in particular to justify the violence that they feel they need to use to get their way. And those two institutions are the church and the state. Today, we want to go deeper into the philosophy of René Girard. We did part of this back in July of 2022. We promised you we'd be back with that. That was episode 7, and this is episode 72 or something. It is required reading. So go back and hit episode 7, even if you play it at 2 times speed, because a lot of what we're going to say here today won't make sense until you have. And we'll link the episode 7 in, and if you watch this one, we'll link back, like at the end where YouTube gives you that little thing, go back and watch. That won't happen on Rumble, but it'll take you back, so you can circle through these as many times as you want. It's really, really crucial. Both Jim and I believe it's René Girard's theory that provides what we're calling the anthropological underpinnings of our show, of Gracearchy.
Yeah, 100%. And we started off that other interview, episode 7, talking about how I had found René Girard and the implications, what that meant. And it is very central to what we're doing here at Gracearchy. And so I cannot stress enough, if that episode, if you're not familiar with René Girard, if you know who he is, you'll be able to follow along with what we do next. But if you don't understand mimetic desire and mimetic rivalry, and then I think you're going to be at a loss at some of the things that we say in the episode today. So
mark this place. We'll have the timeline up. You can check that. So I'll run it backwards. At the end of episode 7, we were talking about Colin Kaepernick.
Oh, yeah.
And contrasting how Colin's kneeling for the national anthem and Tim Tebow's kneeling after a touchdown got 2 different kinds of responses.
Yes.
Remember that?
Yes, I do. And we gave that as a concrete application for the pattern that we'd identified, because the pattern that we're speaking of is hidden. It's hard to believe that it's the way that that this is the way that we function. And so when you first lay out all the steps for somebody, as we did in episode 7, and then subsequently tell a story like that, it brings all that pattern together and you go, holy cow, this still happens.
Yeah.
So it to me, that was a perfect way to end the episode.
Well, it's Girard's insight, right? That this thing that he calls mimetic desire. But
Yes.
This thing that creates the conflict and all of that in the world is something that's fundamentally part of human being.
Yeah, so mimetic is same word or similar word to imitation, right?
Yeah, mimicry.
Yes. So you and I and everyone watching and listening right now, our desires are caught rather than internal. So there's this romantic notion in the world that we we're all self-drivers, we're individuals. And because we're all self-drivers and individuals, we have our own thoughts and we derive our own values, and we act in some rational sense to get to that point. And we want to believe this about ourselves in particular, right? But the truth of the matter is that we have models and we learn from those models. And the key thing that we learn from those models is what is desirable. So we got into this on a very fine level already. I'm going to say to people, if you're saying, well, that's bull, go back and listen to that episode because we went through your objections. I guarantee we covered them. We don't have time to do that here. We got other stuff we want to get done today. This is 102 and that was 101. So if you don't believe what I'm saying, you say that's a big claim. It requires big evidence, Jim. Prove it to me. Already did it. Go back and watch episode 7. But we start off with this idea that the things that we desire. René Girard says that man is the creature that does not know what to desire. And we catch desire or we have it from other people. And so we laid out a triangular model in that episode where we talked about if you've had 3 points of the triangle, we had Matt, the model.
Yep.
He's the thing that's wanted by Sam.
The subject.
He wants what Matt, the model, has. And then there's the object itself that Matt has. And that the closer these two come to each other on that triangle, the closer they get to the object, the more likely they are to fall into rivalry. And so there's the concept of mimetic desire is what we were just describing, and that can lead to mimetic rivalry.
And you pointed out something interesting about that rivalry is that the closer those guys go up the legs of the triangle toward what one has and the other wants, the more they start to look the same.
Yes, and they cannot see this, by the way. They are indignant and they are frankly obsessed with the other person or the other party. And so
Careful.
They cannot see
that word party you just said there. That could be one of those words that gets us banned.
Really?
Sure. It's election year, man.
All right. Okay. They are obsessed with the other, and I mean party in the most generic sense, but it can mean the partisan sense. They are obsessed with the other tribe, the other group, whoever their rivals are. They're going to set these people straight. These people are the problem, and they're at war, and that they've arrived at that position. And each side begins to use the same tactics, begins to make similar complaints, observes the same hypocrisies, but doesn't notice it in their own, right? And so you got Jesus' verse that says that take that speck out of your beam out of your eye before you try to remove the speck from your neighbor's eye, because they're so much like each other in how they're behaving.
You're preaching to the choir, man. I've been in church and I've been thrown out for it too.
So Thomas Hobbes notices this right off the bat, right?
Right.
We're going back to 1651 in his Leviathan.
Yeah, this is not new, people.
This is basically the foundation of the modern state. So, this is right after, basically, we enter the era of the state. So previous
the Enlightenment, the whole thing.
Yeah. So previous to the 1640s or so, we live in the humanity lives in an era where there are kingdoms, and much of the system is feudal. But there's royalty in charge or warlords in charge. And what is beginning to emerge post that point is the state. And the state, so Hobbes writes a justification of the state, right? He says that we exist in a state of nature and we all have to escape it. We have to learn how to live together because nature is nasty, brutal, and short. It's going to destroy us. So we have to come in, and we're caught outside. If we don't have the state on our side, then we're caught in a war of all against all. And only the most very powerful can survive that. Most of us die. Most of us are deprived. And so we have to come up with a way to get together. So to do this, they basically erect what I like to call the super bully. They create a governing structure who will bully anyone who does any bullying.
Right.
And that's his solution. He writes Leviathan because he recognizes that this is a lesser evil, an evil, but a lesser evil. It is the least evil. It's a lesser evil. Oh, by the way, I'm traveling right now. I'm not in my normal studio. People could probably notice from the background here.
Natural light.
We have some natural light right up over here, and it's starting to come back right now. So when it starts to, it's like a roof light. So it changes the lighting in here. Pretty
those of you who believe in such things, you'll know that this is a sign from God. Whenever it gets dark or light, you'll know that's what's happening to Jim. And if you're listening to this, you'll just take our word for it.
Yes. So Hobbes is in this position where he's saying that this is something, it's a necessity that we have some institution that arbitrates any of this.
And that's less evil than having fiefdoms and kingdoms?
Is less evil than especially than being stuck out in a state of nature where we have to fend for ourselves.
Oh, right.
We're going to have to give away some of our liberties, some of our freedoms so that we can exist together.
Well, we haven't had that for 6,000 years, like when Adam gave, or Eve gave Adam the apple, right?
Right. So I want to quote Hobbes here because he gets right to what we want to cover today. And that is, if any two men desire the same thing, which nevertheless they cannot both enjoy, they become enemies, and in the way to their end, endeavor to destroy or subdue one another. In other words, this is no minor matter. This is the interaction of how persons exist inside society. Are we going to exist in a society where our number one goal is to subdue somebody else? And if you think about all the political conversations that you have, somebody has to be subdued. Somebody needs to be suppressed. Somebody needs to be disempowered. There's always some enemy that's held up as the enemy of my progress or your progress or the people that we care about's progress. An enemy has to be subdued.
Even though both parties want the same thing?
Well, what do you think the thing is that they both want? If there's one thing, what do you think that is?
At this point, I take a pass. Hail Mary, I have no idea what anybody wants anymore, Jim.
Well, I think parties are businesses in a way. And the thing that they're selling is broadly, loosely power.
Sure.
The ability to dominate, right?
Coerce.
But specifically, to coerce. And this is what the state does, by the way. See, let me just back up a step and say that the solution, even in technical terms, what a state is, S-T-A-T-E, small s, not like your state of California or state of Ohio or state of Texas. What a state is, they exist all across the planet, is an institution that has a moral monopoly on the right to initiate force. We start off talking about the zero aggression principle. So what the state says is, everyone's going to give away their ability to settle their scores, and they're going to give it to us. And everybody's going to give away their power to coerce anyone else, because they could do it. I could walk up and put a gun to you, right? Say, give me your money. Everybody's going to give that up. And instead, we're going to have the super bully do it. And that was his solution to the problem. And so all of our problems, all of our fears, all of our concerns, we go like supplicants, and we go before the state and we say, this is what we want. And the way that we do this is we choose, in this country, here in the United States, we choose the Democrats or Republicans. If we can get them across the line, if we can be the first candidate past the post in enough races, we get 100% of the power. So if it's a two-way race, it's 50% plus one. If it's a three-way race, it might be 43% or 42% that gets us in, like it was for Bill Clinton, first time he won, or second time he won. I think it's the second time. So it's the first past the post. It's the person that gets the most votes, not even the one that gets the majority. And then they have 100% of the power. And that's how we settle our disputes. And so we go, everything that comes up, we go, well, we got to get the government involved, right? Why? Because they have the bullying power. They can force everybody to get in line.
Behind what we want.
Right. But you start to see there's conflict that starts to go. We have desires. And we just described this mimetic rivalry pattern where there's an escalation. And the Republicans and Democrats look and sound an awful lot alike. They start choosing the same tactics. They throw the same accusations. They accuse each other of the same hypocrisies. They get more and more alike. So René Girard comes at this, and he's not doing this as some literary, as out of the blue. He has a literary theory. And one of the things that's how he discovers this. And one of the things that he noticed is that there was this pattern in novels.
Yeah.
So
sure.
I want you to think about a novel for a second. I want you to think about a movie you really enjoy, or even a piece of music or art that moves you. We called René Girard the anthropological underpinning for Gracearchy, his philosophy, right? Anthropology is the study of man, of human. Okay, it's the study of how we work, how we function.
What makes us tick? Our motivations.
Yes. Okay. So if we're saying that he's coming up on an anthropological theory and that he discovered it in a literary basis, what we're essentially suggesting is that novels are written in such a way that they touch something in the human being.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. If my dog reads my novel, probably doesn't have the same experience, right? He doesn't, my dog wouldn't consume the book in the same way that I would.
No, he would consume the book.
He could consume the book, but not in the same way I do.
Yeah.
And the way that, so it's getting into our heart, it's getting into our spirit, it does things in our mind, and ideas start to move and shape us from the inspiration that we're getting from the page, from the inspiration that we're getting, or the feeling that we're getting from the big screen, from the inspiration we're getting in our ears from the sounds that we're hearing. We're touched. So there's a talent that comes with this. If you're touching people, there's a talent that comes with this. You must know how to strike those chords. And Girard noticed that there were a whole bunch of really long-running authors who would traditionally, their novels and stories stood the test of time. There's certain stories that might be a big hit today that will not be remembered 10 years from now, 20 years from now, let alone 100 years from now, 200 years from now, 500 years from now. Why is it that certain things are so enduring? And he says this pattern shows up in the most enduring works again and again and again. And so if they're touching a nerve, now we've moved from anthropology to psychology. And we have psychoanalysis, right?
Well, we had it long before we called it that.
And so he's actually arguing that these authors were basically your proto or pre-Freudian psychoanalysts.
Yep.
They had understood something significant and important about human nature. And the reason the story connected with us was they conveyed that understanding in an emotionally compelling way.
Sure.
Okay. So he starts off with Stendhal and Flaubert, I don't know, Proust, Dostoevsky.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's where he starts off and seeing these patterns, right? And then Shakespeare becomes one of his favorites later on in his intellectual journey, writes an entire book about Shakespeare because he sees this pattern recurring again and again.
Sure.
So this pattern shows up as anthropology first. First it's literary, then it's anthropological, then it's psychological. So we're starting to really get a social understanding here of how human beings interact with one another. Their desires are not theirs. They're imitated. They're caught. That's how we gain our desires. And again, if you don't understand what I said and you think, gee, Jim, you're saying something without base, we did all the 101 spade work back in episode 7. And then what happens then? Let me just touch on the anthropology a bit more here. Because Girard starts digging in beyond these novels into mythology.
Oh, sure. Right.
Perfect. And that brings us to where I really, really wanted to go today. Because he sees the pattern of mimetic rivalry there. And it became apparent to Girard that the system of mimetic rivalry and scapegoating that I want to focus in on today was also a profound anthropological insight. And it had to do with how we preserve our nation or our country or our people, and how we and why we have religion. And that's really what I want to focus in on today. I want
Okay.
people to understand those things, the source of those things.
So, just so I'm wrapping my mind around this, we've got the mimetic desire, which per Girard and a whole lot of other people who have contributed to the literature of the world, is why we do what we do.
It's why we do what we do. But this next step, which we started to get into the surface of, we covered the basics and the most important points in episode 7, is that when this rivalry heats up, it can get very violent.
Right. Desire can become rivalry, and that can become violence.
Right. Now, the
And
violence can, in a lot of these cases, can be verbal, and it can be just really damaging. It would be wrong to say, and anybody who would say that, it's not violence if it's just words. The words actually have a profound effect on us,
sure, they're
right?
recognized in court, emotional abuse.
Because words, you're right, words can hurt, and words can be ways that you can defraud and cause material damage. You can stir up a mob and get bad things to happen. Words can have impact. They can matter. And if you're in let's say, a work setting, and there's a rivalry going on there and the parties are warring, the ability for the company to do its work profitably declines, right?
Yeah.
There has to be some harmony in that situation. We need to have some kind of social harmony. We
Uh,
want peace. We want harmony.
But you're saying also that we need to tension in
I'm
order
saying
to unlock the next thing, right?
I'm mostly saying here that I want to focus mostly on the peace aspect. Our normal
Okay.
baseline is that we have some desire or ability to get along.
So we prefer, part of the mimetic desire is a preference for harmony.
It is a preference for harmony. So we're watching these parties war, and maybe you're sucked up into it, or maybe you're on the outside of it. But either way, we gain an awareness, whether we're on one of the teams that's warring with one another or we're watching this from the outside. We gain an awareness that this has to come to a stop. Something needs to be done to arrest this. We need a ceasefire, to borrow a term. Okay. We have to find a way to get back to peace. And the parties themselves are unable to do this because, I don't know if it's ego or saving face or whatever. They're caught in a spiral of escalation, and we need a de-escalator.
And it's not a football game. It's not the fourth quarter. There's no time on this. It's just,
Right.
it runs until something changes.
Something needs to change. And so a solution is introduced again and again and again, and it shows up first in mythology. So we find out that this is the ancient pattern that's been there all along, and that is the scapegoat. So this is an innocent third party. Now, when I say innocent, I don't mean blameless. It could be that this third party actually did do something wrong. It could be that they even contributed to the situation. It's possible. But what I'm saying is that they are existentially not responsible for what happened. They are being given a role or a level of blame that is beyond their ability. And there is a huge, distinct possibility that they are actually innocent of the crime.
So is this like the fall guy or the guy who takes one for the team or that kind of
Yes.
thing? Or is it?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. And they have to be destroyed. Now, in a more modern sense, that doesn't necessarily mean murder. We've gotten a little bit better about finding ways to hide the process and make some of it less violent. But so it might mean getting thrown into prison or taking their job away or whatever. We say that they're responsible for the situation. They must suffer a serious punishment of some kind.
Okay, so time out for a second here, because in honor cultures like Asian cultures,
Yes.
where if you're the CEO and things go bad, your responsibility to the company is to step down.
And we have some of that here as well. And like I said, there may be some degree to which some of the blame may rest with the scapegoat. But what I want to emphasize here is the scapegoat is nowhere near capable of having been completely existentially responsible, and that the odds are incredibly high that they had no blame in the matter at all.
So
They are a convenient uh, convenient to blame.
So the buck stops here is an acceptance of the scapegoat role.
In some cases, yeah. I've got to think about that, but my instinct is to say yes right now to that.
Even if it had nothing to do with you. I'm thinking of Nixon resigning. It's pretty obvious. But there are other cases where there wouldn't be that level of connection that we could make. You know, it wouldn't take the Pentagon Papers or whatever. There wouldn't be a chain that would link the scapegoat directly to the
Well, let's
rivalry.
start with something a little more distant from all of us.
Yeah, please.
Let's go into mythology. Let's get into some mythology, and then maybe we can build towards some more specific modern sense. One of Girard's favorite stories from mythology is the story of Oedipus.
Oh yeah, great story.
Okay, so Oedipus is told he's under a curse. He is going to murder his father, and he is going to marry his mother. So Oedipus flees. He gets out. He gets away. So that's impossible. There's no way it can ever happen. But he ends up in a situation where he encounters a man on a road one day, and bada bing, bada boom, he ends up killing that man. And the reader gets to find out that he killed his father. He doesn't know that yet.
He still doesn't know.
He then, through a series of circumstances related to that event, ends up in a position where he marries a woman to ascend to a throne. And once again, he's now married his mother. He doesn't know this in advance. These things are revealed later. Now, Oedipus says, you should punish me severely. He gets severely physically punished and then banished. He actually says out loud, I'm the problem. I brought the curse upon all of us that we're all experiencing right now. You should punish me. Thousands of years have gone by. People have looked at these stories in mythology, and they've assessed them. And our modern way of doing this is through Joseph Campbell. He's the most prominent way that people assess these stories. And I'm going to tell you, he's all wet. René Girard has unlocked the code. Oedipus did not offer himself up and say, physically gouge my eyes out, banish me from the city. He probably didn't even do the crimes he's accused of. But in a pre-scientific, superstitious time, the gods need to be satisfied. And a story gets created that says he's the one that did it, and the mob sets upon him. By the way, Girard noticed repeatedly there was a pattern with these characters, is that they had some physical deformity, which Oedipus has. He has a physical deformity. And again, it's somebody who's weak or has some physical deformity. There's something off-putting about them. And they end up taking all the blame. They get murdered. They get punished. They get executed. And then the problem goes away. The way the story's told, after they were destroyed, everything got better again. The sun came back out just like it did here in the living room of the place that I'm at right now, out of town. So that's Oedipus's story. Flash forward to our own country, to our own continental era. There were witches. And they were blamed for the trouble. And they had put hexes and curses and caused bad things to happen to the community. And so they ended up being sacrificed or destroyed. Now, clearly, neither Oedipus nor the witches were responsible for the calamities that had come about. But if the calamity goes away subsequent or for some period of time after we've destroyed these witches, then the primitive people can conclude, oh, we have solved our problem. And so, sacrifice is an inherent part of the culture again and again and again. It used to be kind of in a sacrificial system,
sure,
which we're going to get to in a second, that literally did sacrifice human beings or spilled blood to atone to the gods or fix the problem that was out there. But I don't want, before getting into that or even how it applies today, I want to make clear Oedipus was innocent. The witches were innocent. And what I mean by innocent is they were not responsible for what happened. In fact, Girard goes so far as to say that science is possible because we don't do this as much. It is because we start to ask for better explanations that science is possible. This is how we settle disputes. But to this day, even though maybe the mechanism is increasingly hidden and more sophisticated, we still feel the need to punish these people. We still need to find a way to make someone to blame for the fact that we're having a fight right now. And this death, this murder, or this destruction that we've agreed upon of another human being now becomes the first thing that you and I as rivals can agree upon. Yes, Oedipus was to blame. So even though we were rivals, we don't have to be anymore because we killed Oedipus and we solved our problem. And we're allowed to save face in that process. And we gain peace from that. And we
I was wondering,
yeah.
So that's saving face by blaming somebody else, by blaming the scapegoat, allows things to come back to, I don't know,
balance,
not equality, but balance. Yeah, for
balance.
a while.
Yeah. We get maybe this state of balance or peace or harmony, whatever you want to call it, the Tao, whatever you want to call it. We get back to that level point, and we can go back about our lives. The rivalry, the big fighting's over. The collateral damage is ended, and we've all been able to move on.
Until it happens again.
Okay. So how do we keep it from happening again? So we've already covered that Girard is literary. That's the source.
Yeah.
And that literary theory. And then that evolves into an anthropology. And then and Girard's observation is the reason these authors are so successful is they're basically proto-psychoanalysts, right? So we've now touched into psychology. And it turns out it's theology on top of that.
Well, sure, because you can read this all the way through the Bible.
You can read this all the way through the Bible. And but there's a specific story that has a very big break in the pattern.
Yeah, I agree with you, Bob. I know where you're going.
Okay. So you go and you look at all these stories of mythology and you see, and I want to just wrap up on Oedipus. I want to say one more thing about him. The mythology is written so that we can expunge the people who murdered Oedipus or any of the other mythological characters of the crime of destroying an innocent person. So a story is told and it becomes part of the culture. This is how we do things and the why it works this way. We had to once upon a time kill the witches. And that made everything better. It was necessary. We had to do it. We had to burn the village to save it. I don't know. But we had to destroy them. And that's how we got to better. That's how we got to healthy or good. And so that character then becomes kind of a hero or a totem. And they basically come back in the mythological account to tell us that they deserve to die, that they were dying for us.
Yeah, there was a purpose, sort of a noble purpose.
A noble purpose. And they were in on it. They were endorsing it. They were willing to be sacrificed to do it. And the key word in all this dialogue today, for me, is the word sacrifice. The entire problems that we're facing again and again, and the reason we believe we need the state, and the reason believe we need religion again and again is that we keep going back to this ancient pagan system of sacrifice. Something has to be destroyed so that we can make the peace. Somebody is holding us back. Somebody is to blame for poverty or homelessness. Somebody is to blame for the environmental destruction. Somebody's to blame for this and that and the other. And they need to be turned into monsters that have to be destroyed. And then our monsters will tell us through theology. So now we're starting to get into religion, right? They will say to us that it's okay that you killed us. This was necessary that you do it. And the story of Colin Kaepernick was about the rituals that we set up to remember the sacrifice. That was the main point of that story that we told in episode 7 of Gracearchy. So Girard goes through, he's not a believer at this point, but he ends up reading from the Bible, and he reads the story of Jesus, who is also sacrificed. But unlike mythology, where the myth is that the victim was innocent and they were in on it, they wanted to go along. That's why it's mythology, as far as Girard is concerned. we find out that the scapegoat is entirely innocent. In fact, this is the story of stories. This is the greatest story of all time because we find out that the victim was the most innocent person in history, and that the trial was completely rigged, and that he was tortured beyond belief. And to make this reach every nook and cranny of humanity, we've in the West have had some ability to emerge in a large degree away from honor culture, but all of his honor is stripped from him as well. Cursed is any man who hangs on a tree. And in this story, one of the key players is a high priest by the name of Caiaphas.
Oh, yeah. Poor
And
guy.
Caiaphas justifies the crime. He gives us the key. He says, it is good that one man should die rather than that all should perish. So that to destroy the rivalry and dissent we have at this moment, to bring everything back, these, at the time, Jews who were captive to Romans and enemies thereof were willing to destroy one of their own to preserve their nation. This was the peace. One man dies so that the rest of us don't perish. And Girard noticed that throughout the Old Testament, there is what I like to call an evolutionary arc of stories getting further and further and further away from this sacrifice model that was common to the pagan world of that time.
Yeah.
Getting farther and farther away from sacrifice. First, getting away from human sacrifice, which is the story of Abraham and Isaac. Abraham comes from a culture where human sacrifice is normal. This is the right thing for a religious person to do. He comes from that culture and he says, no, that's not my thing. I don't want you doing that. It'll never happen again here. We go through the Joshua's rampage to basically set up what became the territory or nation of Israel at the time, ancient Israel.
Yeah.
And the very first city he conquers, they kill everything. All the men, all the women, all the children, every innocent, every cattle, like everything must be destroyed.
Yeah.
But he even evolves in his story. He starts realizing, no, maybe we shouldn't kill the children. Maybe we shouldn't kill the slaves. Maybe we shouldn't kill the cattle. Like he has these emergences where he starts to relieve. There's less and less of this kind of destruction, to the point where you get to the end of the Old Testament and God is speaking through the prophets and saying, I hate your sacrifices. I didn't want you to sacrifice. I wanted your heart. I wanted you to want to be with me, right? You do these religious ceremonies. You've forgotten me. You've forgotten the wife of your youth. You're not doing the things you're supposed to do. So there's this arc that's occurring where it's going away. And that culminates in this story, this greatest story of the most innocent man destroyed so that the nation does not perish. And Christianity goes one step further. They choose the symbol of Christ's torture to mark the ultimate scapegoat, and they wear it as a symbol. I'm talking about cross. How many people do you know have a cross tattoo or a cross necklace or a cross keychain or a cross on their car or a cross hanging on the wall in their home and obviously in their churches? They put this torture device. It's a torture device. It was a terrible, vicious, brutal death. They put this torture device up on the wall to remember it. It's a ubiquitous part. This little jewelry bauble. It's the most popular pendant you can get for a necklace, right? I mean, it's very much iconic and a part of our culture. So Girard pointed out that in myths, the victims are to blame and the communities are always innocent. But in this biblical sense, the victims are innocent and the collective violence is to blame.
So here we are, a couple thousand years later. Nobody's refuted Girard. And if he's right, there's no way to stop the cycle. It's going to continue.
I think there is, and it starts with being aware. And it starts with and I think it concludes with Christ himself. That's my belief. So let me start with the awareness part. You've already
Okay.
heard a lot of this through now 2 episodes. You
Yeah.
start to see the scapegoat that's out there. And I have to tell you, the way that I watch the news and the way that I look at stories and the way that I see our world, when I look at war or political division, when I see these types of things happen, when I see religious people fighting with each other, I recognize the pattern that's going on.
Sure. Yeah. And I've started to now too. It's like,
Oh yeah. So
it's an
a
overlay
take a
everywhere.
denominational split, for example,
Oh,
any
everywhere.
denominational split, right?
Yeah.
They're fighting over something really small. And frequently in these cases, there is a party that is defiant and says, we are the true, we are the committed, we are the, whatever. And the other side says, no, we need to be more open and we need to do this other thing so we can bring in more people. So there's they have this fake dispute over principle versus attraction, right?
Right. Right.
And this pattern keeps happening again. It's split after split after split, right? And the things that they accuse each other of frequently are the things that they themselves are guilty of. And we just see this again in politics. Republicans, Democrats will accuse Republicans of astroturfing. I love this. Okay, so you've astroturfed. What this means is every one of your activists that showed up to the event left their cushy jobs and got paid to come out and participate in the protest. And why do Democrats think this? Well, because a lot of their protests are made up of people who are in various groups that are funded by the government who show up in protests. I'll come to your protest today. You'll come to mine next week. And this is how they frequently do things, right? So they see what they know,
Yeah.
right? And vice versa. Like this, neither side is blameless in this kind of behavior. So we've gone through, let's review it here. We've gone through anthropology. We've gone through psychology. Start with literary theory. Literary theory, anthropology, psychology, theology. And now we can go to sociology. And we can talk about the founding of a state. We can talk about the founding of a religion. Because at the founding of every religion, and religion basically means religion, bring together.
Bring together, relink.
Like we had people that were starting to spread apart, maybe because of violence. We're going to rebind them. Legion is binding, right? So if we're going to rebind, that's what we're doing. Religion rebinds everyone together. And this is the event that does the rebinding. And I'm using that word in the most literal sense. Religion means to rebind.
Yeah.
A legion is a bound unit of men. Okay? At every religion in every state, there's a sacrifice of a scapegoat. You can find it. Every one of them. You just basically have to look for the blood. Where's the blood at?
Oh, that's easy.
Okay. So ritual killing in many of these cases has to be repeated. We don't actually go out and do all the killing all over again, but we invent ceremonies. And then we hear slogans like freedom isn't free.
Freedom isn't free. Right.
And so we have to follow the ceremonies. And that's why we finished the previous episode on Colin Kaepernick on episode 7. If you don't believe me and you understand how this all connects together, we explained it there. But my point is that in these fights that we're having over Colin kneeling, is that fundamentally, we're still dragging Isaac to the altar. We're still sacrificing human beings. This belief that we have to kill men and women, that some of us have to die in order for our nation to have its freedom. First off, we're going to, in an episode neighboring this one, we're going back to the war truth thing. Perry Willis is going to talk to us again about the value of our Armistice Day. I'll go through. Our wars here in the United States are not justified. The major interventions that your government's all of them were based on lies. Some of them were based on false flags. And many of them actually made the world worse. In fact, arguably all of them. There's one that's debatable exception. Made the world worse rather than better, and led to future problems that some of which we're still living with today. There's things that happened more than 100 years ago in World War I that we are living with right now here today. Look to the Middle East and you'll know what I'm saying. That's just one example. So we didn't send these people to die for some, again, there's this romantic myth that there were reasons for this war, that somehow or other, two sides measured up the costs and benefits and decided they had to start killing each other until they could settle their differences. That's baloney. And the way that we sanctify all of this is we honor the dead and we elevate them to deific status. And we get them to say back to us from their grave through the various symbols and ceremonies that we do, the rituals that we enact. That's what religion is about. The religion is about having certain rituals. We recreate the killing so that hopefully we don't have to do it too soon again. But eventually it doesn't hold. The violence returns. We got to go back and we got to kill some more people to get it done. Power is a narcotic, and the cup of blood is the communal beverage of the mob, Girard suggested. So when they shout out, crucify him, when the mob is all together shouting out, crucify him, they are asking for the cup of blood to bring them together. And that is the scapegoat. Now, I want people to recognize that in almost every single debate you see where people are getting angry and charged up at each other about the way of the world, that they are acting like each other. They are imitating one another in their behavior. And that the thing that is brought forward to attempt to get them to cease fire, to have peace with one another, the one thing that they can potentially agree on is that they are not to blame. Bill, you and I fight. You ain't to blame. I ain't to blame. Our egos won't allow it. We were morally just to do what we did. But we can agree to blame some other party for having caused all this trouble for us. And if we can come together to destroy them, we can drink the cup of their blood. So you say, wait a minute, Jim, I'm seeing a pattern here. Don't people get together in churches and drink from a cup of blood?
Yep.
Are they recreating a sacrifice too? Yes, they are. But the meaning of it is entirely different. The scripture makes clear that if you say that my brother is a fool, that I've already committed murder against him in my heart, I should settle my differences with him. I should come to the altar completely blameless. I am not blaming anyone for my problems. I am not in rivalry with anyone. I am not calling my brother a fool. I have no murder in my heart. But if I do, and I'm having a hard time putting it aside, then who I should crucify, the person I should choose to blame, is God himself. God said, I will take this blame. You come deal with me. Stop picking on him. Have the fight with me instead. And guess what? I already paid. It's over. Sacrifice ends. In that story, the veil gets torn. The sacrifice is symbolizing that sacrifice has come to an end. This is supposed to be the sacrifice of sacrifices, the final one, the most innocent, most blameless lamb possible. There's no way. And you know what? Jesus isn't to blame for what you did. He ain't, the other side isn't to blame. Like, if you're going to go and say, wait a minute, I'm going to pick my bone with God now, right? Who's innocent. That's what that cup represents. This is the point, Bill, where you and I, if we had a difference, we can come back together again. That's what that means.
In my mind, I'm watching Tony Soprano go to confession. Right?
Yeah.
Because, you can get away with it. That's where we've gone.
I do. Yes, people can abuse this. But I'm actually suggesting that the imitation game, where we start imitating one another's human beings, is our problem. And the reason that I suggest that Jesus is the thing that you should imitate, the imitation of Christ, the true imitation, the true model. I can't possibly be in rivalry with him. How do I compete? How do I compete with God?
So what we've got here is a situation where the scapegoat lets us as human beings keep going because we're going to continue to have these rivalries.
Well, we get back to peace temporarily. Everybody,
we have moments of peace, right?
Conveniences end for the time being.
It's like happiness. Happiness is an emotion. We got a lot of other bad ones, but we like happiness. But every so often we get it, and then it goes away.
Yeah. And then we come back and we reenact a ritual so that we can remember that we're all supposed to be at peace with one another.
And our
it
objective
breaks.
here is, I mean, rivalry can be a good thing, but our objective here is to what? Try to sustain the moments of peace longer and longer?
Yes. Yes. But I would say that there's only one way to do that kind of effectively permanently. And that is to the degree that people end up taking up the cross themselves. They decide that they're not going to engage in rivalry, where they're going to start to try to spot it happening. They want their eyes opened to seeing it all around them. And then they're going to choose a new way, which is to say, I will step into this. I'm not going to engage in the blame game. So it's real interesting because these verses that say, judge not, lest ye be judged, are basically saying, don't choose sides unless you want to be in the battle, unless you want to be destroyed in it.
Well said.
The interesting thing is that when you choose to judge not, both of the sides may look to you as the scapegoat. They may decide that you are the one that needs to be blamed. And that's why the scripture uses the concept, take up your cross and follow me. A willingness to enter in and to be accused of being a sympathizer with one of the bad guys. The acceptance of that mantle, if that's what it takes to stand up and say, we have to end this and we have to find a way to come together peacefully. We don't want to have scapegoat in this situation, and we don't want the rivalry to continue.
Well, I mean, to be blatantly obvious here, that ain't what sells.
No,
You know what I'm saying?
and it's funny because there's one more that gives me an opportunity to say one more thing here about our social condition here in the United States of America. David French writes the following words: "It was always foolish to believe that a less Christian America would be a less religious America." Or we can go to René Girard, who says, by denying religion any basis in reality, by viewing it as a sort of bedtime story for children, we collaborate with violence in its game of deception. And as you know, I'm hesitant to use the word religion, particularly in the way René Girard just used it. I really do believe it is the rebinding based on sacrifice. But the way that I view this is, we have to have a way of breaking the cycle that doesn't involve a scapegoat. And when we get so sophisticated and smart, or we think ourselves to be, that we say, oh, we don't need these bedtime stories anymore, that somehow or this means we will get rid of religion. And we don't. We actually get a more violent religion. We will get rid of God, but we don't. We get a more violent version. And this is, by the way, what Nietzsche was on to. So Nietzsche, René Girard said he was the greatest theologian of the last several hundred years.
Yeah, Nietzsche, for those who don't remember, isn't he the God is dead guy?
God is dead.
Yep.
God is dead. And we have killed him. We have murdered him.
Yep.
Now, René Girard recognizes that Nietzsche's remedy was to go back to Oedipus, that we needed to restore that system, that Christianity had somehow or other made us weak, and maybe it needed to be destroyed. And so Nietzsche certainly didn't intend for this. I don't think he's to blame in any way for what I'm about to say. I don't want anybody to misread or mishear what I'm saying. But the Nazis adopted that philosophy. We could sacrifice. We could sacrifice to make us pure, to make an uber race. That was what we needed to do. We needed to give up our compassion. We needed to give up the cross, and we needed to learn how to dominate and destroy so that we could make pure and be strong. That was the logical outcome of this
approach,
this Oedipus-like, this pagan approach.
Yeah.
So religion is inevitable. It shows up. The Nazi party is a very religious institution. And religion shows up elsewhere too throughout our culture. It shows up in, claims like follow the science. The people in the lab coats know everything. It shows up in our constant appeals to the state, our supplications and prayers that, please, people call it lobbying, but it's prayer. Please do what we want, and then our world will be better. We have the plan. The very concept of ideology. I don't have an ideology. I want to be clear. I talk about politics all the time. I talk about policy all the time. I don't have an ideology. An ideology means I've got a plan for you. I know what the world should look like. I can make the world in my image and it'll be better. This is playing God. And we get together with other people and we play God. These are religious behaviors inherently. And they lead to violence. So I'm a little uncomfortable with the way Girard used that word religion in that context there. But the general point he was trying to make is sound. That when people lose their religion, when they walk away from the traditional ones, they go for another one. The human longing is to go back and figure out some other way that we can build what we have here.
So is Girard saying that religion, whether it's a church, a state, a belief system, a science, that religion is necessary in order to progress, shall we say? Or is
He's
he
saying
offering us any direction forward
if
on
he
this?
were here, he would divide it up in the following way. He would say that you're either going to choose a mythological religion or you're going to choose the biblical one. And the biblical one's a very narrow path. It's one thing. It's the end of sacrifice. It is a case where the victims are innocent and the violence is collective. It's the mob, where we baptize in the myth. We baptize the community. The state is right. Our religion is right. They're allowed to engage in violence because the victims themselves have caused all the trouble. And
Yeah,
I am asking people to be open and aware of the differences between the mythology and the biblical version. And I will tell you that the hallmark that shows up again and again is a new sacrifice needs to be made. More humans need to be fed into the machine. More people need to be destroyed. My enemies need to be destroyed. And if not them, then we will send innocents to go, make up the peace between us. That is a consistent pattern that happens again and again.
So we've
And
had
I
the
am trying to encourage
example.
people to be aware of it.
We've had Jesus sacrificed as an example for a couple thousand years now.
Mhm.
And how's it going? Are we moving more in the direction?
Well, this might be a good place for us to close. I wasn't planning going in on this, but I will say that the one thing about Christianity and this particular story, this particular story, the greatest story ever told, is that it is so powerful that we exist now in the West like fish who don't know they're wet. And what I mean by that is that the milieu around us is entirely Christian. And so what Nietzsche was actually suggesting was that this had led to a certain weakness in the culture, this an altruism of sorts, right? We had too much compassion and not enough strength, not enough power to be truly great, to be the Ubermensch. We didn't have that. And people have adopted and understand that the position that Christ was in was actually the true and just and right position. And so we see it now in everyone's attempt to align themselves with the victim side. So you have intersectionality. That's one area where this starts to manifest itself, right? It's the victim wars. I have 3 credits on the intersectional ladder. You only have 2, right? And so I'm ahead of you. We have it showing up in Republicans saying, being put upon. There was a theme. It's not as prominent I'm hoping here in 2023 it won't be as prominent as it was in, say, 2012. But, the war on Christmas, Fox, Bill O'Reilly used to talk about the war on Christmas, right? And this is playing victim. So somebody said happy holidays to you, and this did what to you? You sensitive little snowflake, right?
Yeah.
And this is the decline of culture, the end of everything. Everybody wants to be in the victim station. That would not have happened at the time that Rome was putting people on crosses. That's changed because of Christ. And so even the people that don't understand or recognize what they're doing, they're swimming in this Christian milieu, not realizing that they're trying to identify with the cross, even in those situations. They're using their victimization to gain power. So they've kind of inverted the pattern.
Yes, which makes my head spin. I mean, seriously.
We went through a lot fast today, even though I tried to go slow. And I'm not sure at all points I've been completely clear. I will say this episode is a lot harder to follow if you watched the one that came before it, if you made it this far, I really hope you did, or you'll at least go back to get your questions answered. That was episode 7 of Gracearchy.
So I heard you say something about religion, and I'm not sure from the conversation that we've had since then whether you're still pro-religion or not.
Bill, in the scripture, it says true religion is this: it's to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God, right? Those are the
Yeah,
things that somebody
that's it.
religion should do. I don't believe
Which,
that
by the way,
most.
for everyone who's listening, that's Jim. So I get that, right?
Thank you. I hope so. What I see as organized religion, I'm opposed to. And I don't try to go around on a one-on-one basis trying to change anyone's mind on this. But on this show, I've tried to be unequivocally clear that I'm a done, D-O-N-E. I'm not a nun. I believe in Christ, and I believe that what he did, in fact, because of this story, because of what Girard has helped me see, I believe that this is an efficacious theory to explain how we can have peace. So I don't see it as a bedtime tale. I don't see it as me fantasizing about something. I think it describes a reality that is ever present in our lives. And it's this scapegoat aspect that's most disturbing to me. So I'm opposed completely to sacrifice. I don't like the idea that I have some power to take your life and put it on an altar of some kind to gain my freedom, to gain my economic security, to gain whatever it is that I'm seeking to do. I don't believe that that is moral or just or ultimately good of benefit. And even if you can say, well, we become very prosperous with this approach, I would argue that we've also destroyed ourselves in a lot of ways with this approach. And the arc of history, as people have begun to understand more and more the imitation of Christ, is to move away from this approach. I don't see churches doing it. So I'll be real blunt. If I go into a church and I see a flag on the stage, an American flag, I already know I'm in the wrong place. I already know that they've decided to trade away the kingdom of which Christ spoke, which was not of this world, for this temporal one. When I read a voter guide, left or right, telling me which ones of the people are going to bring about a more Christian environment, and the right does this more than the left does, then I say, once again, they've lost the story. They're missing the point.
Yeah.
How many people are going around saying, take up your cross? How many people are going around saying, you know what, you can't solve all the problems of the world by gaining political power? In fact, you will become like your rivals when you enter the process. And so the biggest lesson for me in all of this goes back to my involvement in the Libertarian Party. I was a disgruntled Republican who joined the party in 1996 because I saw the Republicans didn't have any principle. So I joined the party of principle. 7 years later, in 2003, I get a phone call from someone named George who worked at the national office. And I had badmouthed George. And by the way, I had good reason. I was a rival. Something had happened that George had not towed my particular line. And I was blaming George for not standing up and doing the right thing. And George called to confront me. And I thank God that he did. And I realized in that call, I said, George, you just made me discover that I can't renew my membership because I don't like the person I've become. And he said, no, we don't want you to leave because, George and I had, by the way, up to that point, had been friends and allies. We were on odds on one issue. And here I was behaving like a monster. I was gossiping and bad-mouthing him. And if you didn't have gossip in politics, inside political parties, they wouldn't exist. They're made up of gossip. And so I dropped out. Now, I've still voted for libertarians because I want the smallest government possible. I want the least violence. I want the least sacrificing of my neighbor possible. I don't want all of this fighting. I don't think we should be stealing from one person to give to another. I don't think we should be collectively engaged in violence around the world. So I want out of this, and so that's the best way for me at voting time to express my values and views. And I learned then that I didn't want to be part of that particular contest. I recognized that I was caught up in a rivalry that made me more and more like my enemies. And now, coming full circle, I'm sitting here in Gracearchy, encouraging people to take up their cross instead. Change yourself first, hopefully by imitation of Christ, but at least recognize what's happening here. And then humbly accept that you're not God. It's not your job to change the world. That when you get into that business, inevitably, you're going to start sacrificing other human beings.